Lenin, the age-old questions of whether God exists or not. In recent times, the hard use of science, particularly in cosmology and physics, your fields, have been used to show that, at the very least, God is not necessary. How do you look upon the use of physics and cosmology to argue against the existence of God?
Well, I think that the history of science shows that God is not necessary to explain the universe. I don't think that, for instance, we now know that evolution can create us. We know how the universe got to be here through the theories of cosmology. We haven't ever come into a barrier where we said, then a miracle must have happened. In fact, we never see miracles in the lab. We see everything following the laws that we've discovered, or we create new laws. So I am a big believer in the idea that God is not necessary for the universe, that everything that happens follows the laws of nature, and I've never seen any evidence that that's not true. However, let me go from science to a more mathematical, philosophical statement, which is that we haven't proved, science does not and cannot prove that there is no God, and I don't understand people who seem to believe that. Just because we are showing that we can have mathematical laws that describe nature doesn't mean that we're proving that God's not there. Maybe God created the laws. Maybe God was necessary to come up with the quantum principle. I mean, I think I'm not one who believes in the Bible. I find it very hard to see how people could believe in the Bible. But on the other hand, I'm somewhat, religious. I go to synagogue sometimes. I just, I'm more of what you would call an agnostic. But I see science as being separate and religious beliefs as being separate, and one doesn't prove the other. Maybe I'll say one other thing, that one thing I do have trouble with are people on the other side, people who, they're scientific atheists and they're radical theists who don't want evolution to be taught or don't believe in the Big Bang. And I get very puzzled by that because, I sat, when I was, the high holidays came and I was in the synagogue, I was looking through the Chumash, that's the Torah, the Bible, and I was reading about a couple things that I wonder how these people, how they deal with that, where the Bible says, kill homosexuals, and maybe they don't, maybe they believe that homosexuality is wrong, but it also says things like, if your child is disrespectful, kill him. I think it stoned him to death. That was the punishment for disrespect of a child toward the father. Told my daughter Olivia this, by the way, and she said that's okay because it doesn't say anything about girls. But somehow people who believe in the Bible find a way to dismiss those things, and yet they have trouble dismissing that the earth was created in 7 days and that people were put on the earth and evolution isn't true. And I think that if you're going to believe in the Bible today, there's a lot of stuff you have to dismiss, explain away, or whatever in the realm of moral issues, and that you should also use those same techniques to explain away the wrong physical picture that the Bible gives of how we and the world got here.
And so as a scientist and as a physicist and knowing everything, how do you approach the concept of the possibility of some spiritual or some additional factor? You're saying it's not necessary, you don't need it, but it could possibly?
It's not necessary, I can't disprove it, and for me as a scientist, and not just a scientist by training or profession, but in my heart as a scientist, I tend not to believe things that there's no evidence for. But it's not always true. I do believe, for instance, in aliens. I believe that there's life on other planets, and I think there's no evidence of that, and we don't understand the origin of life on Earth well enough to say how probable it is that on another star life would form. But in my heart, for some reason, I find myself believing that. But that's rare for me. I usually believe things based on evidence, and I've never seen evidence in my life for God. In fact, I've seen evidence against God in some ways because my parents went through the Holocaust. Their families were all slaughtered, and it's hard to see how God would have made that decision.